Thanks,
Joining me now, Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger of Illinois, a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee. Great to see you, Congressman.
You too. Thanks.
So the president's back in town. Where do you see signs that he made big progress? Where do you see signs of success from his trip?
So this is what's always interesting to me. So I don't know yet. I think he's going to make announcements. We'll see when it's all kind of the after. But I've never seen a president come back unless it's like, you know, Ronald Reagan meeting with Gorbachev, where they come back with some massive signed agreement and massive success in hand. Really, a presidential trip is all about making the statement that we're engaged and we're focused. Where I think the president did himself some real good in Asia was just the fact that, you know, I feel, and you talk to, frankly, my friends on the other side of the aisle here on the Hill, when President Obama did the pivot away from the Middle East to Asia, he never actually really pivoted to Asia. So I think by the president being there, it sent a very strong message: unify our allies against our adversaries like North Korea. And we'll see if there's any trade news to come out. That'll be to him to announce. I don't know. And
a lot of things with Obama on that pivot to Asia got in the way. Like what happened in the world at the moment.
Yeah,
Let me ask you on
tax.
That's exactly right. On taxes, do you support, Congressman, right now adding the repeal of the individual mandate to tax reform as they're doing in the Senate?
I don't want to see it because I think it muddies the water. I think we should do tax reform as pure tax reform. This throws health care into it. I'm not saying I'd vote against it if it came out of the conference bill. Ours doesn't have it in. I'm not actually convinced it's going to get out of the Senate with this mandate repeal in it.
What do you hear?
Well, I mean, you look at what you've seen in the past. You've seen, you know, a number of senators that have voted against basically the skinny repeal, which was basically this thing. So I'm not sure if it has the votes. I don't know. I'm not in the Senate. Maybe it does. But that'll be interesting. So when that ends up going to conference with our bill, which doesn't have the repeal, we'll see what comes out. I think it muddies the water a little too much, but I'm not going to tank tax reform for it. And I also still want to repeal Obamacare. I just think, you know, obviously we failed at that for about 10 months.
Do you think if it's added, though, and if you would vote for it in the end, because it's not like you're anti getting it in, does this hurt your chances, though, in following through, though, on the actual promise of repealing and replacing Obamacare eventually?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've basically failed at that anyway. We did our best to get it done. It came very close in the Senate, couldn't get it done. And I think what we risk as a party is, frankly, making this the issue continually going forward. I've said, you know, while I still want to repeal and replace this bill, at the same time, there's real people out there hurting, and and Obamacare is actually failing. So we need to do what we can to make sure that people's lives are not really harmed in this process.
Well, let's talk about whose lives are impacted by the tax bill writ large. This is supposed to be a middle-class tax bill. One big selling point has been that the cuts to corporate taxes will benefit workers because the companies will reinvest that extra cash. At a Wall Street Journal event yesterday, a group of CEOs were asked exactly what this means for them. Listen to this.
Can I ask you all a quick question? If the tax reform bill goes through, do you plan to increase investment, your company's investment, capital investment? Just a show of hands, the tax reform goes through? Okay.
Why aren't the other hands up?
Why aren't the other hands up?
In case you missed it, you don't
ask a question you don't know the answer to.
Yeah, there you go. Only a few of the CEOs raised their hands, and Gary Cohn seemed confused by it. I mean, do you think you should rethink this? That is a telling moment.
No. Look, if you go back to 2 years ago, President Obama was all about cutting corporate tax rates. He understands, and frankly, honestly, my friends on the other side of the aisle understand that our corporate taxes are way out of line for the rest of the world. You have to adjust with this millennium. We have a tax code from 1986.
That's almost separate, though, from what we're talking about here. That cutting corporate tax rates would go directly to reinvesting that money to help that would go to the middle class, go to their employees. They didn't raise their hands.
I think it would, but even if that doesn't happen, and I think it would, even if it doesn't, what we're doing is we're motivating companies to stay in the United States. Right now, companies are chasing lower tax rates in other countries. When we sit around and people talk about, you know, oh, Pfizer or these other companies have left the United States for another country, they're not leaving because they have better, you know, IP protection or because they have better regulations. They're leaving because they have a better tax rate. And we can do one of two things. We can either demonize companies that leave, in which case more companies will still leave, or we can actually make ourselves attractive to these companies to stay. And that's what the United States has been so good at for decades, is making ourselves attractive to be the world leader in companies. So I get that a lot of my friends on the other side of the aisle love to attack the boogeyman, which is corporations and everything, but the is if we want people to be employed, we have to make this country attractive to business and job creators. And I think we're going to do that in that code.
Those are CEOs. Those weren't Democrats on the other side who were saying that they weren't raising their hand if they were going to reinvest it. Let me ask you real quick,
I wasn't
finally.
at that meeting, but it was definitely a bad visual, that's for sure.
There you go. I know that you've already said that Roy Moore should step aside from the Senate race in Alabama. Would you like to see Jeff Sessions as a write-in?
Fine. I want to see somebody as a write-in. I want to see somebody else as the candidate. Look, I said a week ago, our party should disassociate ourselves from any aspect or fiber of Roy Moore. I am not the party that defends what appears to be child molestation. Roy Moore is a bad man. I believe these accusers, and I think he needs to step aside. And frankly, he can call himself a Republican. He's the real rhino, a Republican in name only, because our party needs to disassociate ourselves from him or anybody like him.
Congressman Kinzinger, great to have you. Thank you, sir.